Hello, you're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. It's about family, connected parenting, celebrating your amazing body, connection with your community and finding your truth. Our show is coming to you from the studios of BayFM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network and globally via our podcast at pbbmedia.org.
You're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet to inform and inspire us. Our show is coming to you from the studios of BayFM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network. You can find us on iTunes and Spreaker through your favourite podcast providers and also on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Just look for Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond or PBB Media. And our website is pbbmedia.org for more information about us. In this episode of Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, we are speaking with Jane Hanckel, a long-standing, passionate social entrepreneur. Jane has had a passion for childhood education and supporting the health of families and communities that started early on in her own life and that has evolved with her as she travelled the world, studied, worked and raised a family of her own. With a background in film production and directing, communication, business and education to back her, and many years working within disadvantaged communities across Australia. And with the support of a dedicated team, Jane has developed a powerful educational and community support program. This program differs from what is widely available within the traditional education system and aims to provide a more holistic and sensory-appropriate approach to raising our children. Is not only wonderfully successful, but now being sought after by schools across the state and beyond. Jane is the author of 2 books, Growing Greener Children and Parenting as an Art, and is currently working on a new documentary in association with Documentary Australia, the title of which is Creative Resonance. Hello, Jane.
Hello, Annalee.
Oh, I'm so happy and excited to have you on the show and so honoured that you've come.
Thank you.
Jane, I'd love to hear about your current projects. We've heard a little bit about your history just before, but I'd love to hear about your current projects, starting with your upcoming documentary, Creative Resonance.
Yeah, Creative Resonance is a 6-part series which explores innovative solutions empowering young people to navigate and flourish in this shifting world. There are kids out there experiencing high levels of depression, anxiety and stress like never before. And this education is a key part in that. And these 6 documentaries, small short-form documentaries, will explore these innovative solutions, which is so important because many parents are bewildered about what the choices are, what if there are choices. Educators, we know, are feeling very frustrated with the system, and even Gonski report last year came out and said it's an industrial, outdated model of education that really needs to change. So this is a film that will really tackle that head on and provide some really interesting answers and solutions.
It's so exciting. Education is something, having 2 children myself, that I'm incredibly passionate about and interested in. And just one of those, such a big topic, isn't it? Like healthcare, education is incredibly vital to get it right, yet we're hearing so much frustration and sadness around how the system is really working out on the ground for people. And I know you've recently travelled to Finland to do a bit of filming there for the documentary, and I know that they have such incredible education system there. Tell us what your insights are from travelling there and what's so different.
Well, one of the things that they did was very boldly make all education free. So they abolished private education in the 1970s. So it meant that everyone from all walks of life, particularly obviously the high socio-economic, had to take an interest in their children's education and what it looked like. Then they really looked at the curriculum and came up with a very holistic curriculum that focuses on the well-being of the child as a prime importance, as well as the obviously academic success. But the academic success they see as coming out of the well-being of the child. So some key insights into that was the school starting age. Children only start at the age of 7. It's a very rich arts-based curriculum.
Yeah, I know a lot of parents would want to know what happens until they become 7. What kind of support do parents have in terms of childcare? And
well, up to the age of 3, women can receive, if they want, assistance to stay at home. So
Amazing.
Their paid parental leave goes to
up
the time
to the age of 3.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that is just phenomenal.
And I think really what underlines it and underlies this, and I think is kind of very salutary to remember, is that because Finland's only a country of 5 million people, that it hasn't got any natural resources. They've turned around and said, our people, our children are our most valuable asset. So we've really got to look after them, invest in them. They can't afford to have a population of which 20% are flourishing through the school system, and 50-60% are struggling and feeling like they're failures. And that's what's happening a lot of the time in the Western system.
Beautiful. And what else can you tell us about the documentary?
Well, there's many aspects. I mean, really wanting to get across what some of the highlights of the Finnish curriculum and the Finnish successes are, and looking then at other countries who've replicated that. So in Malta, they had a situation where they were failing academically, and so they went, okay, we'll just put in more teachers, more study, more academic work for the children, and their results kept going down. And then they introduced an arts-rich curriculum, and their results just transformed.
Amazing.
And so one of the people I was privileged to meet and interview was Professor Anne Bamford, an extraordinary Australian woman working in London, and she's working with the City of London, and she's turned around 173 schools in the inner city of London through an arts-rich curriculum, which both means more arts education, quality arts education, and more education through the arts, which is one of the things they're also doing in Finland. They're bringing art pedagogists in to work with science teachers, maths teachers, English teachers, so the lesson becomes a exploration of creativity and learning, as well as this very subject-based, and that they've found to produce amazing results.
Why is art so important, Jane?
It acknowledges the individual gifts of each child, because when you look at art, there's not one right way to do art. And if, as Anne Bamford discovered, she was a UNESCO World Scholar, a quality arts-rich education can really draw out the innermost essences of the child and help them contribute to society. People who have an arts-rich education vote more, they're more engaged, more community-orientated, they have greater self-esteem and resilience. So it's very powerful because it gives people a sense of who they are.
Jane, I'd love to tease out a little bit more information from you and more knowledge, and from your incredibly vast gathered body of knowledge. So this film is kind of like one of your most recent projects, but tell us a bit about also this other incredible project that you've got going on, Inspire Ed. I love it. It's so beautiful. The name itself conjures up so much for me. And inspirededucation.com.au if you want to have a look while we're chatting, if you can. Tell us about this new app that's come through, and why is it so relevant?
Through the work I've done in communities, run programs, like you've mentioned, I've written some books, worked with universities, written academic papers, and kept feeling there was a missing piece of how to really activate transformation in families and in individuals, and provide a voice for the children in both the families and communities. So earlier this year, we sat down and did this wonderful design thinking methodology process with our whole project, and came up with the concept that really people needed to create and have the capacity to create their own values and vision and have regular family meetings. This is what we've done in our family, and I've heard of other families that have done it. And it's a very powerful way in which the children can have a voice in the family. It creates a cohesiveness, it creates self-esteem and resilience. Tim Kasser, who was mentioned in Johan Hari's book Lost Connections, writes about meaningful values and how they'd done a study of an experiment over 3 sessions that when parents and children were asked to talk and reflect on meaningful values, they changed their values, became more intrinsic in terms of love and connection and relationships, valuing those, which most people, I think, do. But in this very materialistic world we live in, we get distracted. And that's the aim of advertising and the world we live in, and now, obviously, social media. And so that the self-esteem and resilience increased. So we came up and then worked, and over a period of time with a fantastic app designer from Spain, we created the Inspired app, which is about creating meaningful values and putting them into action on a regular basis.
Been able to have a little sneak preview of this beautiful app and looking at it from a parent's point of view, but also from a child. I'm a child of parents. I come from a family and I'm the eldest of 5 children. So looking at it from that point of view, both as a parent and as a child, how excited I was about this orientation specifically from inwards outwards versus from trying to gather all the information from outside and work that through you, but rather looking inwardly at our values and what's really important to us, and putting essentially using those filters for everything else that comes through our life, whether or not that's suitable or not, rather than trying to sift through all of this masses of information. And I think that's a really calming. For me, that was really calming, and I felt relief. Now, yes, that's the way I want to live. And I know I already do some of that, but to have an app to guide us as a family, to unite us on the same page, that was incredibly exciting for me as a parent. Yeah, and I wish we had that for our own family.
Well, very soon. We're just about to launch a crowdfunding campaign.
Yes.
Well, we have launched today a crowdfunding campaign.
Amazing. Congratulations. Tell us about what's the crowdfunding campaign for?
Well, the app has been designed. It's been through a UX user experience testing process, and so we're in need of $4,000 to help finish coding the app and getting it into the hands of parents and children and families.
Yeah. And where could parents go, or interested community members go, to find out more about the GoFunding campaign, but also about the app itself?
On the Inspired Education site, there's a link it's actually on Pozible, the crowdfunding platform.
Oh, yes, yep. Sorry, not GoFundMe, it's on Pozible. Yeah.
And there's a link to the video, which introduces the principles, and then also a link to the page on GoFundMe.
Amazing.
Oh, sorry, on Pozible.
There we go. Those. It's amazing how quickly our brain catches on to information, and that's why it's so important that we expose our children to very curated and carefully selected information, not just kind of bombard them with whatever's available. Isn't that kind of, we've kind of come to that place where we're looking at balancing between those two aspects, and I think it's great to have something like a really strong set of values to guide us with how we move through sifting through all of that information. And specifically, I'd like to hear more about specifically the type of education. I know you worked for many, many years in disadvantaged communities across Australia, and I'm just watching one of the videos yesterday to see the responses from those community members who were exposed to that particular, your program, the educational program that you were offering to the young children there. Can you tell us a bit about that? I want to know the essence of what are you hoping for children? What can you see is so valuable for children? What do they really need?
Children, first of all, really need a loving, caring adult or adults in their lives. And that sounds almost sort of like it's a given. But in these communities that are under stress, economically or socially, that connection is often lost. The people are distracted, they have no money, they have no house. If they do, then chaos is happening. So we were invited into work in communities and bring these principles that we had found or in our own family life and in my children's schooling, the principles of connection to nature, creativity, healthy nutrition, songs, games, stories, rhythm and experiential learning. And what we found was the transformation in the well-being of the children was almost quite instant. People couldn't believe it in some of these communities. These were children who were literally on a kind of knife edge of being taken away and removed from their family because of huge dysfunctionality. When exposed to a play area that had no preformed plastic toys, and very quiet, calm colours, and with this singing and healthy food, the children changed. The parents took longer because they were carrying lots of their own concerns. But when the parents changed and the children changed, then extraordinary beauty and warmth happened.
Amazing. It's incredibly inspiring to hear those stories. And I know that not only your work within disadvantaged communities has really supported those communities, but also just in the regular, everyday people that are not disadvantaged, that on the contrary, that might have everything that they need and access to whatever finances or support or care that they need, but yet still there has been quite a bit of impact from your work within those communities. Recently I heard a story from a father that you had met that was struggling with connection with their child, and that you brought some of that information into their relationship. I'd love to hear that little story, if that's okay with you to share. Yeah.
Yes, a very good friend with a 2-year-old child who he hadn't seen for a while, and he went, I will just get sort of the latest thing. And so he got a Barbie shelf with lots of colour and lots of things on it, and yet the child didn't play very interactively with it. And so I said, look, please, can I have the opportunity to give you a gift and go and find some very simple things that can transform both the child and their play, but also your relationship with the child. And so the following week I'd got some wooden bowls and some lovely shells and rocks and some crocheted strings and a simple doll, one doll in a basket wrapped in some muslin. And the father sat down to play with the child, and you could see now there was meaning, now there was a sense of purpose. Before, the child's play was entertaining, trying to be entertained, and the father trying to be entertaining the child. But with these very simple things, you could feel the child's consciousness was just able to rest and be quiet and explore and really go into that imaginative, free, creative space. And then the parent as well. It was quite extraordinary. A really gleam of magic happened during that time. Yeah.
And those are quite incredible, important and guiding principles, really, in terms of the way we kind of expose children again to things and information and ideas and all the sensory and stuff like that. And we're quite complex as a living organism. There's so much going on for us, and it's ironic. I think people don't realize how the simple things, I think there's the focus here on the simple, tangible, natural aspects and elements that can be brought into that child's life, how those help that child become that more flourished, complex organism, while all of that, the bombardment of information actually does the opposite. We think we'll give it more and more and more and all of this kind of shiny stuff and all of these different things, but that actually almost dumbs the child down, because it's, for whatever reason, all the reasons I'm sure that you're more adept at explaining than I am, but to allow that natural, because that's the difference between the child having the space and time to evolve their own creativity and their own exploration of the experience, rather than kind of the set, this is what's happening, and then they have to kind of interact with what's already there.
Yes, I think people underestimate the creativity, the natural inherent creativity of children, because we as adults have become, this has got one form and one purpose and that's what I do. But children, as Ken Robinson said, that they can think of hundreds of uses for paper clips.
Yeah.
Yet we give them these pre-formed, and that comes out of the brain research in the late 90s, where they looked at the brain and said, yes, the child's brain is better developed, it's stimulated, but the stimulation comes from the loving interaction, voices, acknowledgement, sharing, the everyday things. But they appropriated that message and went, okay, we'll just produce all these toys to stimulate, inverted commas, the child.
Yeah. Jane, thank you so much. You're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, and you're hearing from Jane Hanckel, a social entrepreneur, filmmaker, and author of a couple of amazing books, and also just a long-standing educator here in Australia and across the recognised internationally as well. We're here talking with Jane Hanckel today about education here in Australia and across the world, her latest projects, which include an incredibly insightful documentary which she's making in association with Documentary Australia, and recent projects, Inspire Ed, which is an incredible app for parents and which is going to be launching in a few months and is now in the beta phase, and also needing some support from the community in order to launch it into code and to bring it to life. And Jane, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Your work has inspired me for many, since I've known you, since I've known about you and about your work, and loved hearing about it over the last couple of years, and just seeing more and more of how important it is that I see this across the world. We were slowly here in the West and in developed countries waking up to the ways that we're doing things, and how really our education system, our healthcare system, a lot of it's based on information and ideas of people from, a couple hundred years ago, and very slightly evolved and changed over the years, but really that it's time for a change, that our education system today is not really equipping children for the world that they're going to be living in, or that they are living in, and also it's taking a lot away from them in the way of their capacity to know themselves and to understand others. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about this work that you're doing, and why is it so important. And
I was so delighted when I was in Finland to hear from Annalee Hallinan, who had been involved in writing the curriculum for 10 years or so, and she now works with does work with the OECD on their education design. And she said one of the key things with the Finnish curriculum is acknowledging, and it's written in there, the intuitive wisdom of the child. And I think that's so fundamental. And I think we were talking earlier about Western education, and I think one of the things that's so lacking in Western education is that acknowledgement that the child comes with a knowledge, a knowing, a sense of being in the world. Yes, they need to be supported and helped and inspired to know and learn and more about the world, but there is an essence and a unique gift that every child brings, and that the role of education should be and parenting should be really to nurture and explore and help that gift to shine for every child.
That's such a beautiful vision, and such an incredible way of seeing things. It does really seem like that our education system here in Australia and in the modern world is all about telling the child what to think, rather than exploring what their capacities are with their own creative powers, their own creative knowledge, their own creative understanding of the world, and infusing that and supporting them with their unique capacities and things that they're uniquely interested in.
Yeah, and what happens in the West, here in Australia, in the UK, and in England, and in America, you have standardised testing. And that really limits the capacity of what the children can learn, because they are assessed on these very arbitrary and out-of-date measures, and then also limits what the teachers can teach. And they have no standardised testing in Finland. They have only one external test at the age of 18 when the children finish school. So with this broad-based curriculum that really is very holistic, very arts and creative-based, songs and music and nature outside time, that after every 45-minute class is a 15-minute break, so the children really can breathe out and really come back into the learning process. That they can, the standardised testing really limits what people can teach. And what they do in Finland is really value teachers. Only less than 10% of people who apply for teaching are accepted into their Masters of Teaching. They have to have a master's degree. So they are really seen to be very important in the role of teaching. So hence becomes a relationship. And this is what the films will be exploring, is that connection. As we as human beings, we connect with those people around us. And if the people, like the teachers, are valued, they've given freedom, creativity, the capacity to innovate, then the children feel like they're going on a journey of learning.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly valid point to kind of stop and linger on for a moment, because here in Australia we have standardized testing, we have quizzes from year one, but this constant need to assess the children, that goes on until now we've got NAPLAN and all of these different ways of testing the tests and making sure, we're kind of addicted to testing, but only specific measures, only a specific type of knowledge. While as here we see in Finland, where I'd love for you to comment on this actually. Could you share with people who may not know Finland's outcomes?
Yeah, well, interestingly, they have one of the shortest school hours in the Western world, up to only 5 hours. And as I mentioned, it's a very arts, creative-based curriculum, yet they have one of the highest academic ratings in the world. But they don't teach for the PISA testing. The Finnish educationalists from the Ministry of Education and different people I talked to about that said, we don't teach for the PISA, we teach for the children. We teach to give the children skills to be creative in the future, in the future shifting world. That is what we teach for. And in fact, the PISA testing are introducing in the next couple of years a new criteria, which is creative and critical thinking. But when I last heard and talked to my colleagues in Finland, they were unsure of how to actually assess creative and critical thinking, because it's such as we talked about creativity in art, it is so individual and such an extraordinary gift that each person brings their own particular aspect to.
I mean, what's coming up for me is this whole need for assessment, this black or white, this results-oriented point of view versus one that doesn't perceive the results or outcome as the main important aspect of living. And I think there's a lot to say for what's coming out now these days, with a lot of women speaking up around what they see as valuable and important. Or it's not to say that men don't see that either, but there's a lot of this coming through of more of a feminine knowledge of understanding that the journey itself is just even more valuable than the outcome, and the journey itself having a holistic overall experience, a whole being experience for the person going through the daily life, having that intact and well cared for is more relevant than some outcome on a piece of paper somewhere, and that we need to be focused on making a meaningful journey for ourselves as individuals, but specifically and especially so for our children, rather than holding them accountable to somebody's idea of what knowledge is, which may or may not be useful for them in the future. And as we see, we're not really preparing our children for the reality out there. And I think I'd love to hear from your point of view. Do you see that reflected back to you in terms of the system being kind of more masculine oriented in a way, or is it not masculine or feminine, but more there's just new threads of ways of looking at things coming through? And yeah, it's a bit of a complex question, but
I think there's a push from both men and women, but I think women, because of the childbearing sense of importance on social relationships, see the need for this interconnectivity and meaningful connections with people. And when the only assessment of a individual or student is their academic results, it's kind of losing, I think we all know as human beings, it's really losing a huge part of who we are and what we have to share and offer. And I think everyone feels it to a greater or lesser extent, but there's a paradigm shift. And it has to occur. And that sense of well-being as a fundamental priority for schools and schooling and education and parenting needs to be there. And many of the parents I've talked to going like, yeah, my child's unhappy, and they're obviously distressed about their child, but if they get through to the year 12, they've finished their HSC or their leaving exam, then they'll be okay. I've got one of the colleagues I'm working with, Christopher Clowder from the Alliance for Childhood UK, saying that 50% of mental illnesses start before the age of 14 and 75% before the age of 18. So what we do with and for our children has a huge impact for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, that's when the blueprint is forming, and how we are going to be in our daily lives is formed in our early childhood years, and on so many levels, on our health-wise, physiologically, mentally, emotionally. So those years really are the time that we have, isn't it, to invest and make sure that we're getting it right, and all of that. Jane, what do you see for the future here in Australia in particular, but also for all children across the world?
I think there's a groundswell, and this is what I hope this film Creative Resonance will be part of, and the app as well, because it enables families and communities to really look, as you said, inwards about what really counts in their lives. There's a groundswell of people saying, look, change is necessary. And it's coming not just from the teachers, it's coming from the students, it's coming from the parents, and it's even coming from the establishment. Mark Scott was talking about, who's the Secretary General for New South Wales Education, and he's talking about, a change is necessary. Children need to learn different skills than the current education. But this greatest experiment on earth, our education system, is a huge behemoth that takes time to turn from the top. And I believe it can, with people and parents and community and society getting involved, it can actually shift if people say, look, no, we want to see something different.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And in terms of actual aspects that people can get involved straight away in, and specifically to do with your projects, what are the avenues for our listeners to go to get involved, to get more informed? Where can they go to support your projects, and where can they go to get more informed?
Well, there's some information on our website, the short trailers for the two projects, the Creative Resonance film and the app.
And that's inspirededucation.com.au, inspirededucation.com.au.
Yeah. So, and I'd love to hear from people if they want to get on board with creating these little hubs around that people can work, and to really take this work into schools. One of the things I've had the privilege of meeting with 35 high school, primary school principals from across here in the Northern Rivers, and out of that I've got 20 schools who are keen to work with the program, because there's such a a lack of capacity to hear the voice of young adults as they're coming into their sort of adolescence and their life, and this gives them ability to do that and to be heard.
You're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. I'm Annalee, Atia, and in the studio with me today has been Jane Hanckel, absolutely incredible social entrepreneur, educator, filmmaker, author, and generally a beautiful community member. I'm so honoured to know you, Jane, and to have you in my community to be inspired from and to learn from and to access such great and important wisdom. Thank you so much for everything that you do, Jane. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I wanted to note quickly to all of us listening out there that change happens and has only ever really happened from a small number of individuals and a whole group of others supporting this incredible change in terms of bringing forth change. Having this expectation for it to come from top down is actually, it's very difficult to change the system from the top down. The real change occurs from the grass, from the bottom, from the roots upwards. The roots is what nourishes the tree and the leaves. It's not the other way around. So us as the community members, we're the ones to step up and say, no, actually, this is really important. This change is relevant, and we want to contribute to that. And we're seeing this, as you mentioned, Jane, before, groundswell across the globe on all sorts of different and important issues, from climate change to caring for our environment to changing the way we do organization, changing the way we govern, and including the education and healthcare systems. And within education, if as parents we want to see this change, it's up to us to point in the direction of what change that we want to use our voice to contribute to these different projects that are going that we really believe in. And if you wanted to learn about Jane's work, as we mentioned before, go to inspirededucation.com.au. And if you want to support this amazing app, you'll get so much in return. You'll actually have access to the app itself. So just head to pozible.com, that's POZIBLE.com, and look for Meaningful Values, the Inspired app, or look up Jane's name, Jane Hanckel, Hanckel, and just get stuck into Jane's work at inspirededucation.com.au. There's so much there, and so much you could be doing in your own lives. Get inspired to connect more closely with your children and connect more with yourself and have time out in nature and all of these amazing aspects of that your work inspires, Jane. I've so grateful you've been on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Annalee. Yeah, and so the third part of just to finish off, the third part of the app is a whole collection of inspired resources and tools for families to help them reignite how to have quality family time, because that is what really is the fabric and underlines and underpins the well-being of both the children and the parents, actually doing things that are meaningful and that people enjoy together. So there'll be books, resources, films, videos on the app as well.
Beautiful. Oh, can't wait to have access to that. Thank you for being with us today, everybody, and have a beautiful day out there.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. Tune in next week for more information and inspiration, bringing us full circle. You can find our show on iTunes, Spreaker, the usual social media under Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, and our website at pbbmedia.org.